Well, listen, we are glad that you are jumping in. My name is Drew. I'm the lead pastor around here, and I actually asked our team to move that video right before me because I believe deeply that God does something really cool and unique and special in the life of our church on this thing called Night of Worship. If any of you have been to one of those, you know this, that when we create a particular space for God to speak something fresh and new into each of us and all of us, He does something awesome. So I just want to echo what all of our hosts at all of our campuses have been saying, that if there is any way you can clear your evening on February 26th, we're going to give some space for God to do something really unique, that the Holy Spirit shows up in His people in some cool ways and says some cool things in each of us and all of us that I don't want anybody to miss out on. So jump in on that, because we're a kind of people around here that we are in the process of change. If you're looking for a people that have arrived, that have it all figured out, that have reached the pinnacle, this is totally the wrong place. This is a place full of people who are a mess, but who are in process. What we have found is that Jesus has so much good in mind for us that if step by step by step, we will step into what He is calling us into. Each time we don't try to figure it all out at once. What's the next thing? Then the next thing, then the next thing. And each time we boldly, with God's help, by the power of His Spirit, say yes in His direction. Life gets better, life gets fuller, not always easier, but life has more meaning and more depth and becomes what we actually hoped it would be all along. Can I get a head nod from anybody who thinks that's true? Okay. Listen, that's why we're here. So if you're finding your way here for the first time or you're jumping in and trying to figure this out, that's awesome. You're in the right spot. But just so you know, you joined a mess, okay? But a mess with a really phenomenal leader, a very strong and powerful leader named Jesus, who points us in the best way. And so we're going to do that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we are a people who are changing. So if you've arrived, if you're good, if you're set, wrong place, definitely wrong series. Because we want to change. We believe God has great things ahead of us. And we want change, not for change's sake. We want change for better, and we want change that lasts. And so that's where we're headed with this whole series. Let me give you where we're headed today in 3 words. It's this: join a team. Okay, so that's the end from the beginning. For the next half hour, that's where we're going. Join a team. In fact, with all of the conviction you can muster and maybe just a little bit of a bossy tone, turn to the person next to you and say, join a team. Okay? Turn the other way. Don't leave anybody out. Join a team. As a former coach, I love it. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at what Jesus has said in the vein of bringing good change, lasting change into our lives, making us more the people we want to be. We're going to look at this thing that Jesus said, and it's all in the same theme. And what He's going to do is He's going to say, listen, I know that you have experienced things one way. I know that your culture and your surroundings point you a particular way and even reinforce this whole value set at times. But Jesus is going to bring a huge contrast into that. He's going to say, listen, maybe it's all been like this, but maybe it shouldn't stay like this. Maybe it should change and it should head in a different way. And so here's the contrast, or here's how Jesus says it. He says it this way in Mark chapter 10. The contrast is this: among you, it will be different. Meaning among the people who want better, among the people who will follow Jesus in the direction of better and lasting change, it should be different than it has been. So once again, if you're attached to what has been, I just want you to know there's going to be some discomfort. There's going to be some letting go. If you're going to actually change, there's got to be some unlearning and some relearning. And no matter what, there's some discomfort. There's some hesitancy in that. And so don't be afraid of that. That's natural. Every single one of us is going to experience that. Don't try to hide from it. Don't try to deny it. Just point at it, write it down, acknowledge it, and let's just keep moving. It's going to be uncomfortable at some point. At some point, it will be costly to change. It's easy to stay exactly where you are. It takes effort to go somewhere better. It's hard to set down good in the interest of great. But that's exactly what Jesus invites us to do. It's what He was doing with these guys in Mark chapter 10. To give you an idea of what it was like, I want you to imagine 40 soon-to-be freshmen and high school football players walking into a gym. Okay, so just imagine it, right? You know how they're walking. You've seen this before. 13, 14-year-old boys full of hulking muscle and no, that's not true. 100 pounds soaking wet, but still walking like they're bodybuilders, you know? Their voice cracking all along their way with mommy right behind because they got to sign the papers, right? But this was my experience as a freshman football coach, is that from all these different organizations and teams, school of football, where I was from, didn't really start until high school. So they were in what was called JFL, Junior Football League, and they were all different kinds of clubs and organizations along the way. So all of these heroes and various people would collide, heroes in their own mind, heroes would collide into this one team. And we had this opportunity and challenge of taking people from all different places and trying to help them join something together that was meaningful for them and for others, that would help them grow, would help them change, would help them become young men. Sure, win some games, play some football, do the thing, but become great young men. But to do that, they had to set some things down. So I could have just as easily used Jesus' word. Listen, among you guys, it's going to be different. You can walk in with your swagger and your posturing and your status and all the fear that you have just beneath that surface and the facade, freshman boys, just beneath that, all the fear you have of, will you measure up? Will you have a place? Will you have value? Will a coach know your name? Will someone help you get better? Will something good happen and come about in this? To take all of that concern that they were trying to manage and say, listen, guys, that's not how it's going to be with us. It's going to be different. In fact, the way I told them was, I'm really glad you had a great time in JFL. Some of you were heroes. Some of you had great experience. Some of you have great records. Some of you, all of these things. But from this point forward, it's going to be different. In fact, I told them, if I ever hear the letters JFL in that order, you have happy time, and FYI, it's not happy. Because it was time to do something different. It was time to do something together. It was time to set down this wrestling for status and worrying about your place and instead find out how you can contribute to this new thing. And that shift alone was helpful in helping young boys become great young men. Jesus essentially does the same thing for his followers. His followers had come in with a whole set of experience and a past from all different walks of life, just like all of us have. We have had all kinds of experience that have shaped us and made us the people that we are. Some of it very, very good, some of it not that great, some of it really tragic and hard, and all kinds of things have led to where we are. And if we're settled and determined that where we are is the best place ever, we have no need to change. But if we're not, then we got to be able to look at those things. And one of those things that these guys wrestle with and that these freshman boys wrestled with was status. Figuring out where they fit in the pecking order, where they would measure up, who would see them, how important would they be? Would they be first, second, third, last? Would they play left end or left out? Where were they going to fit in this whole thing? Now, we've talked about this actually at length, and so if this is resonating with you, this whole status thing, I invite you to go on the YouTube or our website, and back in October in a series called Traveling Light, we talked about this at length. But let me catch you up real quick. It's in Mark chapter 10. These followers of Jesus had come together, and despite all they had seen of Jesus' life and his character, they still ask a really dumb question. It's in chapter 10. It says this, "Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him. 'Teacher,' they said, 'we want you to do us a favor.' And Jesus says, 'What's your request?' he asked. And they replied, 'When you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in the places of honor next to you, one on your right and one on your left.'" You see, in that culture, the right side of the most important person was the most important seat, and the left was the left. In fact, I bet if Jesus would have said yes to these guys, there would have been an immediate wrestling match to figure out which was which. You know, they were posturing. They were trying to find their place in the pecking order. But let me just tell you, just like we've said before, status is a burden, not an opportunity. The wrestling for status is actually a sickness. You see, if all of these players who are coming together for this freshman team were only worried about who would start and how would they look and how would they stand out and would they have the best stats and all these different things, would everyone think they're the greatest? It's actually a huge distraction from them becoming great young men and a detriment to those people becoming an actual team that does something really cool and meaningful together. Status is a distraction, and the seeking of status is actually a sickness. It's one of the things that we have to unlearn and relearn. Now, let me give you the good news. For all of us who follow Jesus, we are learning this and finding this out. And for those who may not believe that Jesus is really pointing you the best way to life, I want to invite you to this. Because what these guys were missing was that Jesus had already established their status. These guys were missing it. They're like, okay, there's 12 of us, Jesus, but who's number 1 and number 2? Who are the favorite kids? Who are the best? Who are the strongest? Who is everyone going to see and name? And Jesus is like, guys, you're already with me. They had found out that Jesus was the most remarkable person who had ever lived. And they would soon find out and come to discover that he was not just a person, that he was God made human, and that he could conquer anything and everything that no one else could ever conquer, that he could conquer even death, and that he would do that on behalf of everyone. And they had a place with him. He saw them. He knew their names. He knew their strengths and their weaknesses. He valued their company. He had a place for them. And he invited them to begin a movement that would last millennia and reach billions of people with hope and a meaningful life. And yet they wanted to squabble over who would sit on the left and the right. Yeah, Jesus, we're in, but who's the best? It's like, you're missing it. It's a distraction. The beauty of what Jesus was accomplishing was not just in these few people who followed him, it was in for all of us. That what Jesus would accomplish is to clear the way so that every single one of us would have presence with him. That every single one of us would be seen and known and have value. That he would know each and every one of us and live deeply with each of us by his Holy Spirit. That when he paid on the cross for everything that would separate us from God, all of our hurt to us and hurt to others, he cleared the way so that God could set up camp with us and say, you have a status. Stop fighting for one. I gave it to you already. Christian, this is the beauty of this. Follower of Jesus, this is the beauty of this. God says, I got you, right? God says, you're with me. God says, you're in my family. God says, if you trust Jesus, you have a place with me now and forever. You have gifts, you have worth, you have meaning, you have name, you have a new name you don't even realize yet. I have dreams for you that we'll work together towards for the rest of your life. We don't have to fight for status. We can drop the weight, we can set it aside, forget the distraction, give up the sickness, and live in the status that's already established for us. And the truth is, it's not something you earn. If you're just finding your way toward Jesus, you don't need to earn it. He paid the full price. You get to step into it, and that's what we are doing here, is living our way into what Jesus has already done for us. So, here's what Jesus said. He said, listen, you guys are arguing over status, but let me just tell you the truth. He says this in verse 42. I love this. These two guys kind of come to Jesus on the side and say, hey, Jesus, who's 1 and 2? And if you read this story by another account, they actually brought their mom along. It's just like freshman football. You guys are so tough with your mommy. Jesus says, no. Let's bring the other 10 into this conversation. Jesus had these 12 close followers. You can imagine how well the 10 reacted to these guys trying to shoehorn their way in. It's like the time I cut the iPad line at Walmart. I thought I was going to die. I don't regret it. Verse 42. So Jesus called together all of them, and he said this, you know this, and so do you. All of you know this. You know this. That the rulers in this world lord it over their people. And officials flaunt their authority over those under them. Anybody give me a head nod that you have experienced this? You've seen this. How many of you are super fans of that? You love it. You're like, oh, it's the best leader. I love the ones that lord it over me, flaunt their power, abuse their privilege, right? We love those people, right? No. Jesus is saying, look, I know that's your experience, and we know this. And the tempting thing is that when we experience that, we are tempted to try to power grab too and climb the ladder. We're like, well, I guess that's how it is. I guess that's what we should do. But those of us who are finding our way toward Jesus are like, nope, we know better than that. He says, among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be what? A servant. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be a servant. Whoever wants to be the first among you must be a slave. He says, look. I'm going to change the way you've thought. We know what it is to have people lord it over us, and those are not the people that we greatly respect. Those are not the people who influence us the most. Those are not the people who've made us who we are. So here's the deal. Instead of being baited into that, the way that we know things have worked, let's just stop asking this question, okay? Stop asking, where do I stand? Stop asking that. Accept Jesus' answer for that. Jesus said, you stand with me forever, in my strength, in my grace, in my love, in my provision. You don't need to freak out. You don't need to power grab. You don't need to climb. I got you. And this freeing sense of status allows us to live into the meaning that God actually has for us. To stop worrying about being sent and embrace the honor, or being seen and embrace the honor of being sent. Instead of Jesus giving them a place of honor on his right and left, he was giving them a place for eternity. Jesus is up to something bigger, and so we got to set down the status pursuit and pick up something else. And so what does Jesus invite us to pick up? He says it in these verses I read just a minute ago in verse 42. Let me say it again, verse 42, he says, you know this, the rulers of the world lord it over you, and officials flaunt their authority of those under them. But among you, those of you who follow me, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your what? Servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must be what? The slave of everyone else. A servant isn't asking, what can I get and where do I stand? A servant asks a very different question. Very different question. And so here's the call that Jesus says. You want to live differently? Set down what was before, status, and pick up something else known as service. The call is this. Whoever wants to be first, Jesus said it this way in another passage, whoever wants to be first should take the last position, because servants are the greatest. It's totally upside down. It's totally upside down, and these guys didn't get it. They thought Jesus was going to be a king on a throne that conquered and kicked everybody else, just like everybody else in human history. And Jesus was way more subversive than that, because Jesus is a genius. He came underneath and infiltrated every system with this whole new concept of love and service instead of power and conquering. And so he steps in and he says, if you want to follow me, careful what you wish for. These guys asked to sit on his right and his left. And if you read this passage in Mark chapter 10 this week, what you'll find, he's like, guys, you don't know what you're asking. You don't know the path I'm going to walk. Are you sure you're ready? Now, all 11 of the 12 would find their way into this path. 10 of them would give their lives for the cause of Jesus, and the last one would be exiled to an island to the end of his life. They found out what the path of following Jesus really looks like. It's a different question. It's not the question, where do I stand? It's this question, who can I serve? If you want to change for good, change the question. Accept what Jesus says about where you stand and set that question down as an answered question by Jesus. And pick up a new question that you can answer daily. Who can I serve? Jesus said servants are the greatest. What he was shaping in them was a heart worth multiplying, a heart worth growing from them out into everyone, that millennia later, the people who would follow their example would have this same kind of heart in them. Not a heart going after status, but a heart going after service. And let me just ask you, which one do you actually respect? The people who have pursued status and lord it over people. Those people who have forgotten what it was like to get to where they got. Those who have power and authority and resource and fail to use it for others and use it only for themselves. What's your emotional reaction to that description? My guess is it's not great. It's not great. In fact, let's think about it this way. Who are the people who you have most appreciated their influence on your life? Call a few people in mind, like real names and faces. Who are the people who have helped make the very best of you true? The people who looked at the good of you and called it out when you forgot. The people who saw you heading off in a different direction and said, hey, don't forget, this is beautiful about you. Go back this way. Those people who you watched them and you actually emulated them and became like them because of the good in them. Just call those two people to mind, or call a few of those people to mind. Now let me ask you, which one of these columns fits them, okay? One column, status, and one column, service. Because people who are about status are very entitled, right? But people who are about service are about empowering others. Which are the people you appreciate? People who are about status are looking for a place to rest and be seen. But people who are about service are looking for a place to contribute and be sent into the lives of others. Which do you respect? People who are about status look out for number one, right? And it's usually out of fear. I get it. I know where it comes from. I've been that person. Sometimes on the wrong day, I still am. We look out for ourselves and manage our status. People who are about status look out for number one. But people who are about service, they look out for the left out. They find the people who are in need and ask, what can I offer? Very different kind of person. I bet this column is sounding a little more familiar to you than this one. The people who are about status compete with people, but the people who are about service compete for people, on behalf of people. People who are about status are looking to receive, and people who are about service are looking to contribute. Which people do you respect? Which people do you appreciate? Which person do you want to be? Jesus frees us from this category. He establishes status and frees us into service. We can ask a very different question. In fact, Jesus was multiplying his heart. We said it a little bit last week. You could catch it on YouTube or our website as well, but he uses this image of a kernel of wheat. And he says, listen, a kernel of wheat, the only way it becomes anything better than what it already is to be planted and die and produce a plant that produces many, many more. If you found the greatest kernel of wheat ever and you put it on a shelf and you showed everybody who came to your house, it would never be anything different than what it is. It has arrived, it's over. But if instead you plant it and it dies to itself and it raises a plant and produces all kinds of good, right? He was putting in these guys a heart of service because that's worth multiplying. A heart for status doesn't multiply anything good. So we start asking, who can I serve? In fact, Jesus was multiplying his heart. It was his heart he wanted in them. This whole series, this whole thing is about Jesus' heart being shaped in us. And his heart was a heart of service. He says it very clearly in verse 45. After he has said, listen, whoever wants to be first must be a slave. Whoever wants to be a leader must be a servant. He says this in verse 45. For even the Son of Man, he's talking about himself. It was a title he used for himself. Even the Son of Man did not come to be served. And if anybody should have had that right, it was him. The king of everything, the one who spoke everything into existence. But he did not come to receive. He did not come to be entitled. He did not come to rest. He came to serve and bring change and offer. And he says this, that he came to serve others and give his life all the way to the end as a ransom for many. Rather than receiving for one, he sacrificed for many. And he's saying, listen, if you want to follow me, that's what you will be like. He's our model. Even Jesus himself came to serve. So want to call ourselves followers of Jesus? Want to take the name Christian? The reason sometimes that name doesn't ring true is because it doesn't look like Jesus. Jesus was about serving others, about resting in his status with God. That God looked at him at his baptism and said, this is my son. I love him. With him, I am well pleased. And from that status in which he rested all the time, he gave everything to others. He was free to serve all the way to the end and give his life as a ransom for many, which, make no mistake, it was a payment. A ransom is a payment. Service is costly. No one said change was easy. All good things are where? Uphill. Not downhill, uphill. And so, but here's this question that we get to show up asking just like Jesus. Instead of asking, where do I stand? We can ask, who can I serve? And we can show up everywhere we go asking, how can I help? How can I help? Have you ever had other people's kids into your house? Anybody ever had other people's kids into your house? How frustrating it is when they show up with all kinds of demands. And how refreshing is it when the first question out of their mouth is, how can I help? In fact, those people that you thought of earlier, whether they said it out loud or not, they showed up in your life asking that question, didn't they? How can I believe in you? How can I encourage you? How can I resource you? How can I empower you? How can I support you? These are the kind of people that we actually love in our lives. And what Jesus is saying is the life that you long for you is down the same path, being that person in someone else's life. It's why when people come to our house, like if they come to dinner or they come over to hang out, you show up as a guest, but you quickly become family because you will get a greeting at the door. We will pull the dog off of you and put it away. And then immediately you will get a job because we're going to arrive at a dinner that we accomplished together, right? We don't want to keep you in the guest category. We want you in the family category, and family contributes, right? When we show up and we're a part of something, we give together what we brought together to do together all the goodness of being together, right? And so this is the thing. We just show up really, really simply. And so we're actually going to talk about this a little bit in the context of church. And by church, I mean people who follow Jesus together. I don't mean an organization. I don't mean a building. I don't mean just a gathering. I mean a people who follow Jesus together. Because sometimes we super complicate this thing. If we would just show up regularly asking, how can I help? People would be, guess what? They would be helped, which is what we really want. We overcomplicate it sometimes, and I love Jay preached a few weeks ago about spiritual gifts, and I think we should use our strengths all the time and find good things that fit us, find our talents and put them to work. But let's not make it too complicated. Let's just show up and say, let's start somewhere. How can I help? Right? I don't know if anyone actually has a gift from the Holy Spirit for taking out the trash. I just know the trash needs taken out. Right? Everybody wants a revolution. No one wants to take out the garbage, right? A teenager once told me that. It's one of the most deep things anyone's ever said to me. Don't complicate it. We just show up and say, how can I help? Imagine 60 freshman football players all coming with their own preferred positions and preferred future, and they show up with all of their demands and fight each other to the end. If instead they would show up and say, how can I help the team? Very different team. Right? We just show up asking this simple question, how can I help? So remember, I said all this was heading to 3 words, right? And we're getting there. It's a very simple plan we have here to become more like Jesus and to do that in the context of our church, okay? In that order of importance. Become like Jesus. Our church is part of that. Okay? In fact, let me back up for just a minute. I never want anyone around me, I don't believe and I don't want anyone else to believe that it's the church's job or the church is the only place that helps us become like Jesus. That's crazy talk. No relationships actually work that way. You can't categorize them to a place or make them someone else's responsibility. That's each of us. But equally, I believe it's very clear over the whole of what God has said that a group of people following to Jesus together is essential for everyone following Jesus. So you can call that a life group, you can call that a family group, you can call that a church, whatever. Everyone needs a group of people. So seems like many of you have chosen for Canyon Ridge to be your group of people. And a group that size comes with its own challenges. If you're not sure this is your group of people to follow Jesus with, please find a great group of people. There are great churches around here following Jesus. Which one is not important? That you jump in with people and give yourself to people, some of whom you agree with and love, and some of whom drive you crazy, and both are essential. You need to be a part of a group like that. It's modeled over the whole Scripture. Even Jesus had a betrayer in his midst for 3 years. And somehow that was formative to the other followers of Jesus. We can trust. We need a group of people. And I call that group of people a church, a gathering. Y'all with me so far? Now, people will come to me and say, I want to live closer and closer to Jesus. And I'll say, around here, we basically say 3 things. If you really want the best context to grow up in your faith, you need 3 things. Number 1, you got to join Jesus. Point your life toward Jesus. Listen to Jesus in his word. Gather with Jesus people and point your life toward him on purpose. People have been marking that in a really cool moment called baptism. I think that's an important step. Figure that out along the way. But join Jesus. Without his strength and his help, we'll never become who he desires for us to be anyway. It's not our job to get it right first. It's our job to invite him to right where we are and let him walk us forward. That's the beauty of him. He'll meet all of us right where we are. Join Jesus. Number 2, I'll say join a group because you need a group of people. Not a group that you sit in rows with, a group that you face and talk with and know their name. And you can show up in their celebrations and cheer them on and their challenges and grieve with them and do all these kind of things alongside of them. You need a group. So join Jesus, join a group. And the third thing, guess what it is? 3 words. Join a team. This is the simple plan we have as a church to help all of us become servants. Join a team. Join a team, join a team, join a team. Now, here's the thing. Listen, I think each of those are essential in their own way because they point all of us into the kind of life that we hope for all of us. Can I just tell you what the vision of our church is? It's not about buildings, not about campuses, not about size, not about anything. Our vision is this, that every single person who calls themselves Canyon Ridge becomes a person marked by celebration. They cheer people on crazy, and they celebrate every good thing in God's direction. They celebrate it internally, externally, together, and alone. We become celebrators. If you show up and are a part of Canyon Ridge regularly, our hope is that all of us become celebrators because we're not about building a church, we're building people. Thing two, we are about being shaped by God. It's why we look so hard into His Word. It's why we challenge one another and tell the truth even when it's hard. We want to be shaped by God. If you want to be a celebrator, join a team. Right? If you want to be shaped by God, join a team. I think that if we're going to do what Jesus says, He says be a servant. So let's serve together. Right? And finally, we want to multiply all the good that's in our life. So here's the question. Would joining a team lead to more celebration in your life? Have you ever seen a group of freshman boys win a football game? They cheer like sixth grade girls. Because there's nothing more awesome than trying to accomplish something with people and seeing it happen. Watching the goodness that comes about in each of our lives and the people that we're serving. If you want to be a celebrator, join a team. If you want to be shaped by God, that requires challenge and context and commitment. The way we do this thing, as people annoy us as we serve with them, as the people we serve don't respond the way that we want, all the different things that we go through in the midst of serving, it shapes us. If you want to be shaped by God, 3 words, what are they? Join a team. If you want to do what Jesus said, Jesus didn't say, hey, think serving is a good idea and you'll be changed. He said, serve and you'll be changed. Do what Jesus said. And then you get into a role where you're teaching other people and instructing them and you're saying, hey, Jesus said do this. And then all of a sudden internally you'll be like, oh yeah, dang, I should do that, right? We have this thing. Do you want to do what Jesus said? Join a team. And if you want to multiply the good that's in your life, invest in the lives of others, multiply the good. One of the best ways to do that is together with others. Join a team. So all of you are like, Drew, you have spent 32 minutes all leading up to a push for volunteers. Yeah. And radically no. Listen, this is just one way, but it's an important way. It's a vital way. It's a community way. I will unapologetically say that if you want to be a part of a family, you should be a contributor. If you want to be a part of a family and celebrate with them, be a part of what accomplishes the celebration. If you want to be shaped together and have common values, yeah, I'll say that without apology. You want to do what Jesus said? He said it. It's clear. You want to multiply? The only way you do that is take what's good in you and invest it in others. Yes. This is about becoming like Jesus. But the way we do it together is by joining a team. So here's what I would encourage you to do, to ask some questions. Number one, how will I serve? Not how might I serve. Not how could I serve if I magically had 26 hours a day instead of 24 hours a day. Not how would it be a good idea someday to serve. No, how will. Decide. You get to set your intention. How will I serve? Think about it. In fact, on that orange card, there's a whole list of possibilities. Question 2, when will I serve? Listen, if you don't want to change your calendar, can I just be honest? If you don't want to change your calendar, then what you have decided is that you are good right where you're at. That's what you've decided, because your calendar is perfectly designed to shape you into the person you're becoming right now. So you're set, you're good. But if you want better, if you want great, if you want different, that actually has to change. So you got to get really honest and brass tacks, like on paper or in tech, to actually realign the calendar. It will require that, right? But isn't that how someone made a difference in your life? They set their time down to give you time. When will I serve? And then number 3, how often will I serve? Listen, one time is great. Every choice in Jesus' direction matters and should be celebrated. We will be that kind of people. But if you actually want to change for good, change that lasts, that doesn't happen once in a while because practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Over and over and over and over makes something a habit. If you want to become a servant, that happens over time. And so, yeah, we need to schedule that. So here's your action I want to encourage you to do. If you actually are going to call this your church, if this is your family that you're following Jesus toward, I want you to find a way to serve in rhythm. I want to encourage you to find a way to serve in rhythm. There's a whole bunch of options right here on this side. So here's what you do. On the back side, you fill this out. You're like, I don't know all the answers. Well, hopefully you know your name. Start there. And go as far as you can. We put birth date on there so we could steal all of your financial information. No, some roles require a certain age, and you don't have to tell us if you don't want to, okay? And then at the bottom, there's 4 categories. And just outside of the auditorium today, at the corners of the 4 corners of the Palm Grove between here and the kids building, there are people representing each of these areas where you can both ask questions and take this card and put it in their hands. It doesn't take long. Whatever question you have, or if you just want to drop it off, they will follow up with you. And we are shooting for 100% follow-up in the next 72 hours to help you find a place to answer the question, who will I serve? And how can I help? Because over the course of this whole thing, listen, the goal for this is not to fill a bunch of slots. The goal is to become like Jesus, a servant. To take all of the authority and strength that we have and offer it into the lives of others. Just like the most authoritative group of people, it's not a person at our church, it's a group because we don't trust one person at a time. We trust the Holy Spirit in a group of people. Around here, that group of people is called the elders, and they have the authority to fire me on a moment's notice. They are my boss, right? They are the highest authority in our church, save Jesus himself. And so what do they do? What do you think they do when I leave the country for 10 days? They contact my wife along with their wives, and they say, we're going to bring you a meal every single day that your husband is gone so that you can be a great mom. And isn't that the kind of people we actually respect? Isn't that the kind of people we actually want to be? Because at the risk of talking about food at 11 minutes after 12, I'm going to. Think for just a minute. Don't just applaud someone else, internalize it for a minute. Those of you who prepare meals at your house, you know this, right? The meal doesn't start at meal prep time. The meal starts in the afternoon when you're like, what in the world am I going to make, right? Or the week before when you went grocery shopping to plan what you're going to make. The worst part is deciding what you're going to make. And then you get all the things together to decide what you're going to make, and then you start to make it and realize you don't have all the things, and you got to go get another thing and come back and make the thing. And then you sit down with all the small people in your house, our children, who are like, I don't like what you made. And you tell them you're going to eat it anyway because I brought you into... No, you don't do that. And then you clean up the enormous mess from all the effort that you gave someone else to make the thing, right? And she could have done that for 10 days while I was gone, but instead, some people lowered themselves and said, we will take time, we will take money, we will take planning off of your plate so you can be a great mom. You see, there's something really beautiful and admirable when we answer the question, how can I help? And so the goal, make no mistake, it's not about volunteer roles. It's about people becoming like Jesus. The goal is to become like Jesus, who was, make no mistake, a servant. Jesus was a servant, and we want to be like him. That's where we're headed here. The goal is to become like Jesus. And there's a very simple strategy. You know what it is? Serve. And the way we do that here at this church is we join a team. Would you stand and pray with me? God, I'm just kind of laughing at the idea that we talk about such a simple thing for like 40 minutes. When it's the simplest thing, it sounds so simple. Just say yes and do it. But for some reason, we just have all these barriers and reasons and excuses and hang-ups. God, I just pray that we would trust that what you ask from us we would realize doesn't even compare to what you want for us. And that we would trust the path that you've put in front of us to live into all that you have in mind for us. And so, God, may hundreds and thousands, not just at this church, but in their homes, in their workplaces across the city, find places to show up and ask this simple question, become the kind of people, how can I help? God, thank you for Jesus' model. Thank you for your Spirit in us who gives us the desire and the power to do what pleases you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Take your cards out to the Palm Grove. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Drew.
Yes, sir.